So, good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our panel this morning on AI, automation and accountability. Really, this is all about governance. And we're joined by, I think, a really great panel here with Oliver, Neil Gardner, James Mortlock and Neil Jones, all the way from the US. We're not intending this to be a technical discussion. There are other forums where we could go into far more detail about that. We want this to be a practical conversation to help you as security leaders build trust in the output and the decisions that AI will provide you with. So, as you're well aware, AI is pretty much everywhere these days, and it's only going to become more and more prevalent as time goes on. And that's perfectly okay, as long as it is AI that you're aware of. And, I think Neil and Oliver, we will talk about their particular systems in maybe some detail. But the problem comes when you have shadow AI, the AI that people in your organization are using that perhaps they haven't been authorized to do so. And that leads to this accountability gap. And that's a central challenge for us today. AI can produce the decisions, but it can't take responsibility for the consequences. And that's something where people, organizations, and ultimately you as leaders still have to take accountability. So before we get into the questions, let's just have some brief perspectives from everyone on the panel in terms of where they sit on a personal level or on the organisation. So, Oliver?
Hi there, guys. Oliver Lacey, head of sales at Advances. We are a German software company who integrate with and utilise AI rather than being an AI provider.
Hi everyone, Neil Gardner from Rhombus, lead sales engineer for the international business. We use cloud platforms and AI intelligence across the board with the platform, from embedded AI through to the large language model-based AI.
I'm James Mortlock. I've recently established a solo consultancy, and what I do is I help organisations narrow the gap between their policies and what their people's behaviours are. That's where I see the risk sitting at the moment.
And my name is Neil Jones. I'm a cybersecurity evangelist, and believe it or not, I just realized this morning, almost 20 years in that space, and I'm from the far west part of UK, also known as Denver, Colorado. So, thanks for having us here.
Cheers, Neil. So, first question, I think just asking Neil Gardner and Oliver, how are you seeing security departments using AI? What's the appetite out there? What are the use cases? Is there any specific security adoption area?
Well, with an embedded platform with AI embedded at the edge, we see the traditional methods of AI of being people detection, vehicle detection, and so on. Now with large language models, we're seeing other levels of AI. The question I got the other day, can you detect squirrels? People expect you to say yes, so you can say yes now. But it's whether or not the output's good enough to be used for their business. The whole ethos of AI is expectation of that ChatGPT world. So we've got to look and be expectant that the results you're going to get are what they expect.
Oliver? Yeah, cool. Ours is a slightly different approach to it. It's more, are you AI ready? So exactly as we said earlier on, is you do have the edge AI analytics, which is brilliant, but if you're looking at the large language modeling, are we actually ready to utilize AI in this way? And there's still a lot of disparate systems and a lot of kind of lack of common language across the board. I spoke about that last year in a different topic. But the other thing as well is the actual infrastructure, and to say what is the authenticity of the data or your authoritative source, because you only get in or you only get out the quality that you put in. So how clear is that? How uniformed is that when you've got all of these different systems, all of these different departments, everything else, all kind of them building that data source, that data input, which then AI is then utilizing. So yeah, I think the same thing. I think from our side of things, we see it more as, are we a bit like 5G? When 5G was coming, are you 5G ready before you start using it? It's the same thing with AI. Is your infrastructure ready to then use these tools, which is coming? We know that, we can see that, it's here. But yeah, is the organisation ready? And then the challenges of governance in doing that after, which I think we're going to come on to in a minute.
I know in Rick's opening statement, he briefly mentioned the Five Eyes press statement that was released, I think, earlier this week or last week. And one of the things, I haven't read it in detail, but one of the things I saw there was, they said, keep focusing on the basics, which I think links in exactly with what you were saying there, Oliver.
Yeah, exactly that. It can be complicated. It really can, and you can. I like the expectation thing. Expectation is brilliant in what it can do. So, yeah, my biggest thing, if we said the 1 point earlier before we came on, is you only get out what you put in. So make sure that what you're putting in is correct, clear, concise, relevant, and therefore letting AI do its thing afterwards, it will be the best way to optimize that.
James, Neil, anything that you're seeing out there that security departments are doing with AI that strikes you as novel?
What do you reckon, Neil? In terms of cybersecurity, that's surely one of the key areas where we must be seeing an awful lot of AI integration. It's one of the natural bedfellows of the technology, I would suggest.
I absolutely could not agree more. And I think in our next question, we'll talk a little bit more about that in some more detail as well, I hope.
Okay, let's go on with the next question then. So that's really, I'd like to start with you two at the end there. What makes an AI-assisted security decision defensible?
Well, when preparing for this session this morning, I was thinking defensible can be interpreted a lot of different ways. So I think for our audience out here, I prefer to go high level from a technological standpoint, and I've had the pleasure of working with between 20 and 50 companies who are going through AI governance journeys. It's a journey for all of them. That's why I intentionally use that word. The successful ones get access control right, access based on business need to know, which this entire room is probably already doing. They also are able to classify sensitive content, identify content that's subject to UK GDPR, healthcare and privacy regulations. But the true innovators actually add an additional layer there, which is fashionably called AI safeguards or AI guardrails right now, a technological solution that helps users to, if a user does an AI-oriented prompt, sensitive information is not resolved in that prompt. And it's relatively new technology. If you haven't heard about it, that's why. So that's particularly interesting in the agentic space. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about strategy a little later in this discussion, but all of this has to be framed within a responsible AI usage policy that's strategic in addition to the technology I outlined.
James?
I think it's really complicated sometimes, this technology. And one of the things that I advocate is that we boil it back to our principles. So when we talk about the defensibility of a decision that's made, what we need to ensure is that it's audited and documented. Right? A part of our governance, one of the outcomes, is that we need these artifacts. But the decision boundaries that come from it is basically stratified into three in my mind. Right? One of them is, what's the consequence? And if it's low, and if it's low consequences, go for it. Fill your boots, you can automate. Right? Because if it goes wrong, it doesn't really implicate you. Right? There's no reputational damage, there's no financial repercussions, whatever it may be. But the use cases for that are actually quite small. And what you'll find is that we need an extra layer. We need a check and balance in there. Typically, we call that human in the loop. Right? We need a human judgment to be able to assess the decision that's been made and endorse it or not. And you need the ability to turn back if you need to. Okay? One of the areas that I see this go wrong is that we overload this individual. Right? If you've got 500 decisions that an individual needs to make in an hour, that is not going to survive regulatory scrutiny. Right? And the last piece that I'll finalise on is something I'd sort of describe as strategic avoidance. Right? There are decisions that should not be made by AI. There are decisions that we need to clearly demarcate from the rest of what we do to make sure that we are delivering this safely and responsibly.
Oliver, Neil, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think with the AI is perceived as a utopia, but it's not always that. You've got to make sure that you've got that human interface, to double check it's giving you the right output. If there's automations there that are hands off, they could go wrong, like you say. So human interface, notifications, maybe testing of the AI as well, and also the governance of where the source is, knowing that it's a reputable source, it's cyber secure, whether or not it's a shadow source that's embedded or not, understanding where that data's coming from and where the decisions are being made.
Oliver?
Not a lot more to add to that, to be honest. I think it's covered pretty much everything that I would say in a much better way.
Yeah, I think that, you've all covered it very well. So, Neil Jones, are the frameworks that are out there, are they sufficient for the environment that we live in now, whether these uneven or disparate systems? I'm thinking about ISO 42001, the EU AI Act, NIST. These are great on paper, but do they really work in the real world?
Right, this is a tricky question, and I had some help this morning. Francis Jones, great surname, by the way, put it in his own words, which was when government gets involved. And by the way, I'm not trying to politicize this, but what I'm saying is he was very accurate in that even ISO 42201, even NIST, which happened before actually AI even existed, or the EU AI Act, they're never going to keep up with the pace of AI right now, especially agentic AI. So from my perspective, to give some recommendations for our audience, we need to focus on the users in this case, because the users are an area that we can influence. From that standpoint, it's extremely important that there is a responsible AI usage policy that I talked about earlier. Users understand the consequences of misbehavior when it comes to AI. They understand that public AI should never be utilized for sensitive content within the company. And also, one final item, if you don't have an AI governance committee within your organization, you should establish one straight away. And I would strongly recommend that users be part of that as well, so they feel like they're part of the process and accountable.
So I think Neil's hit it absolutely on the head with that final statement around the governance side of things. The frameworks aren't governance. They're really effective frameworks that our professionals, us, we use to assist us in making judgments on a daily basis in lots of areas. But governance isn't about getting compliance. It's not about generating somebody to blame when it goes wrong. Effective governance is about creating an organization that's able to make decisions under uncertainty. All right? And one of the challenges that we've got is the diffusion of the technology touching lots of different people, almost everybody, layered with geopolitics, regulations, your own organizational cultures. It's really challenging. And the one thing that I would like this audience to take away is the value that we can all add as security leaders in driving the vision. Right? Sometimes we've got to cut through the complexity and make sure that our AI governance is values-driven, not value-driven. And what I mean by that is our AI governance trying to achieve an AI rollout, a strategy that is responsible, transparent, with integrity, sustainable? Right? And if we don't drive that, and if we have nobody driving that and grasping the nettle and going for it, then we'll naturally revert to the path of least resistance, which is it's driven by value. It's purely driven by money, right? And if we end up with that, we'll have organizations that cut corners, don't deliver it responsibly, and we genuinely invite risk. So, as a non-technical practitioner, I would invite all of you to try and take that role if it doesn't exist yet, if there is a vacuum.
And zero regulation.
Here's the thing, right? So good luck trying to get a vendor to take responsibility. Anthropic are not going to be answerable for you automating a decision that's gone wrong. I'll tell you that for free. Our institutions are not designed for the pace of change. Right? They're not able to manage this. And so the buck will stop with the organizations. Right? The buck will stop with us.
Yeah, I would add to that, but put in a kind of a procurement aspect to it. I think there's a buyers panel later on as well, which would be interesting to see if they touch on that too. If you don't put a value on it, as a business, as an organization, especially in security, we're not given the same budgets that IT are given or other departments are given. So it's in a really difficult way to build a business case that isn't value driven. So we've all touched upon, if you don't adopt AI, we will be left behind. That's a fact. But to quantify a value and then cross-reference that to the values that it adds, it's fantastic on paper, it's a fantastic ideology. For security directors, it's a really difficult thing to say, hey guys, we need this, because the first question that finance are going to say is, where's the return on investment? Why are we actually doing this in the first place? So it's an interesting one across the board. It's not, I completely agree with you, but then you put the buyer's hat on and you go, well, how does that work? And I don't know the answer to that, I have to say, from my experience there. I still think most people, it'd be really interesting. How many people in a day-to-day environment professionally use AI in the room? If you could do a show of hands, yeah, there you go, okay. And how many, going back to the second point though, how many of you had to do a business case to be able to use that? Okay, so I'd imagine on that, so that kind of proves the point, realistically, which is an individual user, it has access to as an organization, and to create big change, it's a really difficult thing to do and proposition, and how we're going to use that use case. We'll get there, of course we will. I just don't know. I don't know how. That sounds really negative. It's not. It's a good thing, but kind of it's also applying an element of realism in there as well.
It's definitely a double-edged sword. So just to sort of round things up, I'd like to ask each of you if there's one thing, or two things even if you want, but one thing that you would say recommend to an organisation that they should do or consider doing to improve their AI governance.
Personally, it would be qualifying the data source. Whatever you're getting, as we said earlier, whatever you're putting in is going to be the value that then comes out the other side. So that would be me.
I think with the onset of the regulations that are there, the ISOs and NIST and so on, they might not always suit the method in where the AI is being used. So don't discount a product if they're not ISO or NIST. There might be certain other avenues to check the cyberware and the data source. Beyond that, there might be some implications with that compliancy that might rule out that platform, and we don't want that to happen in our industry especially.
Yeah.
For myself, it's about mirroring how we establish and develop a security culture. We should be doing the same with how we develop and deliver responsible AI. And the way that we drive our leadership through our governance structures will diffuse throughout our organizations, and effective communication so that everybody understands these values, I think, is where the most amount of opportunity is in this space.
Yeah, and for me, I inadvertently gave away my response, which is a responsible AI usage policy. So that being said, we talked about users earlier. It's absolutely imperative, following Oliver's advice, to involve your executive team as well. A lot of times executive teams are pushing for productivity, but 90+% of organizations are using generative AI, but only 25% have AI governance. And the risk is right there in that differential. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. So hopefully that's been a really informative discussion for you all. I think there's a few practical takeaways we can have, and that's, visibility is absolutely key. You need to know what systems are in place, what data is being used, who's using it, why they're using it, how they're using it. And from that, you're able to build the defensibility based on evidence. If you have that audit trail, you have the defensibility. Finally, I think frameworks and regulations do matter, and they'll continue to matter, but they need to be taken as more than just a paper standard. It isn't just enough to have a certificate on the wall in the office. Your organizational culture needs to really revolve around the true spirit of what that standard means. So thank you very much to all of our panelists, and a huge round of applause for them.
Thank you.